Natural Habitat Adventures is pleased to be bringing you this webinar today, Photographing Polar Bears in the Wild. And we're joined today by Colby Brokvist. And Colby is a very interesting naturalist guide, been with Natural Habitat Adventures for quite a while. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about him before I turn the controls over to Colby. He hails originally from New England and has traveled and guided extensively throughout North America. He's an enthusiastic naturalist and holds a degree in environmental sciences and has presented independent research to Geological Society of America. He finds his passion for guiding and providing interpretive and educational experiences for all of his clients. And in his free time, Colby is an avid rock and ice climber and has backpacked some of the country's most famous destinations, including the Appalachian and John Muir trails. And we're very fortunate to have him here with us today to talk about photographing polar bears in the wild. So hi, Colby. Welcome.
Hi, Lee. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody.
That's
me. Huh? That's my cue.
That's your cue. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll just put myself on mute now.
Okay, that's great. Well, yeah, hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day today to join me. I expect our presentation is probably going to be about a half an hour here. And, of course, it'll be posted afterwards as well if you're not able to watch the whole thing. But let's get started here. So, yeah, photographing polar bears. Of course, we're photographing polar bears up in Canada. Here we are. Up in Canada, up in Manitoba is where we go. You know, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and people always say, oh, how was Alaska this year? And I'm sure Alaska was wonderful too, but our photography tours are up in Canada. There's a couple different reasons for that. So here's where we're going to be up in Canada, here in Churchill. You can see the red arrow pointing to it, and we're up along the coast. And what's unique about this area of Canada that doesn't happen in other places around the world is that we have a big congregation of polar bears in Churchill. And essentially, this little red line that you see out along the coast is a stretch of coastline where the ice forms up first every year. And so these bears, they know that, and they want to take advantage of the extra few weeks at the beginning of the ice season to get out on the ice and start hunting seals, because they've spent the last few months on the land unable to hunt, going through a fasting period. So they're very excited to start eating again. They need to get out on the ice in order to do that. Churchill is the first place that happens, and we have about 600 bears that are in the Churchill region every year. And so that's what makes Churchill such a great spot for photographing bears, because there's a lot of them all in the same place. So not only can you find a lot of bears, but you can find a lot of bears doing different things and interacting with each other. You can find a lot of various demographics of bears, like mothers and cubs, the big males, whatever it might be, all in the Churchill area. And this all happens at a very specific time of year, which is October and November. So that's why we go to Churchill, and that's when we go to Churchill. So once we're up in the Churchill area, most of the time that we're out on safari is in the wildlife management area. The management area is an area that we're allowed to tour through in order to view the bears, and it surrounds the Wapusk National Park. And the park itself is specifically set aside for polar bear denning habitat and summer habitat, birthing areas, as well as snow goose colonies nesting. And so we're able to go along the border of the park through the wildlife management area, and we patrol sections of coastline. And this is what the management area generally looks like. It's the subarctic tundra out along the coast, and here we're looking inland. And what's neat about the area is there's all these big dirt tracks that we drive on. So we're not just roving, like sort of crashing through everything and out on the land. There's old dirt tracks that were laid down by the military that we travel around on. And of course, what we're out there for is to see these guys. Now, before we start and really get into this, I want to mention to you guys this. There's a lot of opportunities, and we'll discuss them and talk about what those opportunities are for photographing polar bears. I've been working up in Churchill for 8 years, and I average about 5 trips a year. That means I've gone on 40 polar bear trips, and I've had my camera with me on all the trips. So you guys will see some what I think are pretty cool pictures of polar bears, and certainly all these shots are possibilities on the polar bear trips. I've taken every one of the shots that you're going to see on a NatHab specific trip. But with that said, there should be an expectation that you're not going to see everything when you're out there, right? Most of the bears are going to be laying down and sleeping. About 80% of the time, that's what they're doing, is they're sleeping. So you'll see a lot of sleeping bears. But, you know, with patience, the bears get up, they move around. It depends on the weather. You know, the guides, we know the behavior, we know the area. And so we're putting ourselves in positions to see the bears doing cool stuff. And especially on these photography trips, you know, patience is really the biggest part of it. We don't just drive around looking for bears moving around, but instead we find the bears and we stay on them until they start doing cool stuff. The more time we spend with them, the more likely we are to see them doing the things that we really want to see them doing, which is interacting and having fun. So out in the management area, we're looking for bears, and this is what we're riding around in. So these are our Polar Rovers, and they're huge. They're about 60 feet long. Those tires that you see are 5 feet tall, right? So the bears are walking around on all fours, and some of the biggest males are as tall as those tires, which is really cool. The machines that we drive around on, the Rovers, they're all heated. They're very roomy on the inside. Here's the whole NatHab group just in the front part of the machine for a group picture. So there's plenty of room to walk around. Everyone on all the photo trips gets their own window, right? So even though these machines can fit 30 people, it's actually 15 guests on the NatHab trip. So everyone gets their own window. And in addition to the windows, you also get these big decks on the back. So on the decks, we can set up tripods. There's even more room to move around. You know, you can stand out there in the cold and really be out there with the bears when they come up towards the machines. The bears, they all have their different personalities. Some of them, they'll come right over. They're very curious. They'll come right up on top of the machines. Great, you know, for wide-angle shots like this one. Other bears, they'll keep their distance. They'll walk around and maybe sort of case the machines and keep their distance. Some of them will just, you know, they're perfectly comfortable. They're going to hang out, and not only are we going to watch them all day, but they're going to watch us and see what we do all day. So it's really neat. They all have their different personalities, and that's really easily captured in photography. You know, if they come up close or they stay far away, and they all have their own you know, personality. So it's really fun. There's Judy having fun. Even when they're sleeping, you know, they're there and we're still with them and they do cool stuff. I think this is where I'm actually supposed to tell you guys that they spend a lot of time sleeping and we just hang out with them and watch them and enjoy. So yeah, we're going to be on the photo trips. You know, another thing worth mentioning is that all the pictures you're going to see today were taken with the camera with no more than a 300 millimeter lens. Right? So it's kind of like a mid-distance zoom lens. A lot of folks, you know, for wildlife are used to shooting, you know, with big 500, 600 prime lenses, and they're hard to travel with, but, you know, sure, you're real glad to have them. The thing that happens with those really big lenses is there's not really enough room to set it up all the time. Especially if you prefer to shoot from inside the heated cabins. There's not room to set those things up on a tripod, and you can't handhold them. And the bears are moving around. The other thing is that we're on those big machines, and they're, you know, it's windy, it's weathery kind of out there in the tundra, and there's a lot of shake on those machines. And so those longer lenses, they pick up the shake. And then the third reason that they're not as useful on these trips, the long lenses aren't as useful, is the bears tend to be pretty close. And it's not to say that we won't get far bears also that, you know, you might be happy to have a long lens with, but you know, if we spend a little more time, you know, driving around and looking for bears or staying on those sleeping bears and waiting for them to do cool stuff, we sort of preclude the need for some of those bigger lenses. Now, with that said, I've seen a lot of really great shots come from 500 and 600 millimeter lenses on these trips as well. Typically, those are from the areas, you know, around town when we have ability to maybe step out onto the ground. in unique circumstances. And, oftentimes that becomes the bird life, foxes, Arctic hare, that sort of stuff really lends itself towards those bigger lenses. But for the bears themselves, really, anything from a wide-angle lens for some of those close-up shots up to a 3 or maybe a 400 lens if you can handhold them work great. And then we have bean bags on our trips. And so the bean bags help stabilize. You can throw them up in the window compartments or out on the the edge of the deck, and then we shoot on bean bags, and that gives us the stability we need, and it takes away some of that vibration that you find from the machine itself just getting blown around in the wind. So bean bags are the way to go, and with sort of smaller and mid-range lenses. And yeah, then we get to hang out with the bears and start watching them do cool stuff. In addition to hanging out with the bears, waiting for those cool photographic opportunities, there's a lot of time to talk about them, to learn about them, some of the differences and cool things about the bear. This guy's cleaning his coat. You can see that it's a male bear, it's an adult bear. There's all kinds of things you can learn about the bears just by watching them and spending time with them and looking at the differences between the bears. And then, of course, the grail is that then they start doing cool stuff, and maybe we're in an area where there's multiple bears, and they start interacting with each other. So when you do come, think about, bringing a selection of lenses. Sometimes it's nice to put the bear in its habitat, right? Here we have a bear sort of at a distance, and so instead of, oh, I wish I had my 600 millimeter lens so I could take pictures of his eyeballs, it's, well, hey, let's put the bear in its place. Here it is along the coast, with a wider angle lens to teach you something about that bear. And they're not all just close-up shots, right? Some behavioral shots at a distance, and you really get to see the bear on the landscape. It teaches you a little bit more about, what it's like to be there when you show your friends after your trip. And of course, they do come up really close. This is a bear taken through the back deck of the machine. Those back decks have grates on them, so if the bears come under the deck, you can still see them. So this is taken right through the grate. So we'll have bears at all different distances depending on their personalities. They'll be more or less comfortable to want to do cool stuff. One of the opportunities we really try to make happen on the trips is to find areas where bears, particularly the males, are hanging out together to try to get some of the sparring. This is another thing that's very unique to Churchill, is that we have such a high concentration of bears that they'll actually start practice fighting. And it's beneficial for them because in the springtime they're going to come and, they're going to fight for real, for mating rights. But right now, this time of year, they'll get out and they'll play. One question I have from people all the time is, well, what happens? What do you do when there's really bad weather up there in the Arctic? We go out. Bad weather in the Arctic is polar bear weather. And so some of the best days out there for watching bear behavior and really capturing them in their environment is in these cold, snowy, blustery days. And of course, we have all the proper gear for you guys when you come up. We have big jackets and boots and all that stuff to make sure you're warm, and the rovers are heated so you can always go inside and warm back up again. But the colder and nastier it is out, the more comfortable the bears are. They won't overheat as easily, and so we get these big days where they're out there and they're sparring and they're doing cool stuff. And then, of course, the other 80% of the time they lie back down again, and then we get to watch them do some cool behavioral things. Like this guy just got done sparring, and now he's lying down and he's cooling off. He's letting his armpits, all 4 of them, touch the snow, and he's trying to cool down after sparring. The other neat thing about spending so much time with the bears and just patiently waiting is you start to notice some of those details in the bears, right? Here we have a bear that's known as Goliath, and you see he's all scarred up from fighting. He's missing an ear. This would be from fighting during the mating season. This guy had his tooth broken. There's all sorts of neat things that you can find by spending time with the bears. The other thing we try to make happen is the mothers and cubs. It's interesting when you're out there week to week and even one year to another, as a guide, it's neat to see the demographic change in the bears that are around the areas that we can access. And so sometimes, some weeks, you'll have a lot of mother and cubs around. Then all it takes is, maybe one big male bear to come in the middle of all that, and those mothers and cubs, they kind of move back into the, into the periphery again. And then you have a lot of big males around. So, really day to day, week to week, you'll see a lot of different bears, different demographics of bears. And so it's not guaranteed, oh, I'm going to go up and I'm going to check a big male off the list. I'm going to check a mother and cub off the list. I'm going to check off a subadult female. It's, they're all out there. They're all moving around. It's all weather dependent, depending on the bears that are around. They all kind of jockey for position and move each other around. So, the guides are great at knowing sort of the behaviors of the bears in different circumstances, different weather types. They know the patterns based on, having been out there every day. And so we try to take advantage of that guide's local knowledge to put us in whatever the best place to take advantage of the bears that are there that day are for photographic opportunities. And then, of course, it's not just about bears. Even though these are billed as polar bear trips, it's really an Arctic wildlife trip. So there's opportunities for all sorts of other types of wildlife. Here we have an Arctic fox. You can see his nose is all snowy from digging around looking for lemmings. We have snowy owls. This is a female that was in flight. Really cool opportunities. The red fox, another neat thing about Churchill is it's actually on the border of the boreal forest and the true tundra. And so we get animals that specialize in both biomes there. And so one of the cool things is things like Arctic fox and red fox in the same area, and we can look for all of those. Here's a color variation of the red fox, which is called the silver fox, and he's hunting for lemmings out on the tundra. There's some really unique opportunities out there in Churchill that you won't find just anywhere. Churchill is very anomalous that way. And for you landscape photographers, there's just as many landscape opportunities as well. The Hudson Bay in the polar bear season, it's making ice, which means it's giving off heat, which means it tends to be cloudy, right? Most of the days of bear season tend to be cloudy. But those clouds they're kind of at a particular level, and even though during the days it's very regularly cloudy and overcast, at night when the sun's setting and in the morning for sunrises, the sun peeks through from below the clouds, and it makes for some incredible light for landscape photography. And again, we try to make sure that we're out at optimal times to take advantage of that on the photo trips specifically for you guys. Some cool things like big ice spikes and things like that from these cool meteorological occurrences in the Arctic. These are sundogs. This is a nice, bright, sunny day, about as nice as you'll see in Churchill. You can see it's still very windy out, right? All that blowing snow along the ground. But we have these cool sundogs that show up. That's from ice crystals up in the air. And then there's the town of Churchill itself, right? And so each night on these trips, we go back into town. It's about 20 minutes between the wildlife management area and the town. And here I'm standing in the center of Churchill, looking out towards the management area. And this is about half of town right here. Churchill's a very, very small town. It's an outpost town. It's very quaint. It's very, colorful. The people are really interesting. It's a fun place to be. It's very small. It's, I like to call it utilitarian, right? You're not going to find a lot of really fancy accommodations, fancy restaurants, but it's very comfortable. It's very welcoming. It's very friendly. It's warm. It's cozy. The accommodations are warm and cozy. So it's a nice place to be based out of. And in addition to, just being a place to base ourselves to go see the wildlife, there's a lot of neat photographic opportunities to be had in Churchill. And again, one thing that I feel like we as photographers tend to get focused on sometimes on our trips is, oh, I'm gonna get the shot of the bear, and when you're done with your trip, you have like 80 great shots of polar bears and nothing else, about your trip maybe. And so Churchill is really cool to walk around and take pictures of the local area to sort of fill out your own travel catalog. So when you go and you make a book on Blurb or iBook or something, when you're done, you can show off all of Churchill and all of the trip and not just have bear shots. And so again, on the photo trips in particular, we make time and opportunity to go around town and have some time actually on the ground, on foot, to walk around and take some pictures, which is cool. Yeah. Another thing I haven't mentioned yet about the photo trips in particular is that the photo trips, we have one extra day out on the tundra in the wildlife management area compared to the other town trips, right? A misconception on the photo trip would be, oh, well, on the photo trips, we're going to go and see all the really cool stuff and photograph it. We actually, on the photo trips, don't see anything different than what you'll see on the regular trips. But there's an extra day to go see that stuff, right? So we create more opportunities to take more pictures. And the other thing to the photo trips is that you get a photo-specific guide to go with you. So it's someone that's going to be knowledgeable about the equipment, know about light, know what's going to be the best angle and the best, setup where we're going to park the rovers for the best type of shots. And then in the evenings, in addition to some cultural programs, we do photo-specific slideshows, right? So that's the difference. So it's a lot of specialty photo stuff mixed in with the natural history. The other classic photo trips and the ultimate Churchill trips, you'll go and do the same things on those trips and have just as many opportunities to take pictures. You just won't have that special photo guide to be with you. And you never know where the bears are going to show up. This is just outside of town. The wildlife management area, the national park, it's not fenced in, so there's bears around town all the time. And on the photo trips, the other thing that's special is that we have our own private sightseeing shuttles that we have at our disposal for the whole trip. So whenever there is an interesting opportunity for a specific photograph, or maybe there's a fox in town or whatever it might be, we have access to a vehicle so we can hop in and we can go take advantage of that opportunity. Another neat thing you guys might want to consider for the photo trips is there's an add-on to go on a helicopter ride. And there's some really neat opportunities for different types of pictures, both landscape and wildlife shots here from the air. At about a 200-foot ceiling, we have a picture of a big bull moose plowing through the snow out on the edge of the boreal forest. And I apologize, this picture is a little bit grainy, but this is out along the edge of the coast near the end of the season this past year. You can see the ice is all forming up, and this big male bear has made its first kill. And we're able to see that from the helicopter. So if you're interested in, again, creating some different opportunities for yourself, the helicopter shots can be really cool too. And then night photography. I think most of us guides now on the photo trips make opportunity for some night shots. And there's different night shots we can go take. Of course, again, the dream is that you're there on a night with the northern lights. Again, remember, you guys, that the nights tend, all of the days and nights in Churchill during the bear season tend to be overcast. Most people will go up there and not see the northern lights. But 5, 6, maybe 7 nights out of the polar bear season, there are good northern lights. And so, if you're with us on the photo trips and it's time for those lights, again, we have our own private shuttles at our disposal, and so we can go out to cool places like the Inukshuk here on the edge of the Hudson Bay, and we can take some cool night photography with the lights behind there. And there's another one. This is taken from the Tundra Lodge a few years ago. There's a pond you can see reflected in there, which is really neat. So yeah, we're nearing the end of the slideshow here. I would say, to wrap this up, that really our photo trips are for anybody that wants to learn a little bit more about photography, specifically about wildlife photography, while at the same time getting out there with really good naturalist guides and still learning a lot about the bears themselves. On the photo trips, we don't sacrifice, seeing as many bears or learning about the bears. The photo stuff is in addition to everything that our classic trips have going for them as well. And anybody from, people that use a little point and shoot and just print their pictures out in Walmart, to folks that have, big proper SLRs and want to go into Lightroom and Photoshop with them and put them up on the wall or a billboard afterwards. There's really something for everyone on the photo trips. So thank you all very much. I think we're going to open it up to some questions here, if you guys have some questions of your own that I haven't answered yet. And yeah, I hope to see you all up in Churchill.
Great. Thank you so much, Colby. This is Lee again. And I just want to say to our audience members, if you have a question you'd like to ask Colby, now is the time. Just open up your meeting room control panel that's over on the right. You might have to click on that orange button that you see with the white arrow in it. Once you open that, you'll see an area called questions. So go ahead and send it in, and I will read it. So I think I want to start with some of the technical type of photography questions because we have quite a few of those. So let me start with this one, Colby. It says, do you have to weatherproof your camera and lens?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not really. If you're in town and it's extremely cold out, like down into the low numbers Fahrenheit or something like that, it's possible that going in and out to like a restaurant, or maybe if you're on one of the Tundra Lodge trips and you're going to walk through the kitchen car to get to one of the other viewing platforms, you might want to stick your camera in a bag briefly, or inside your coat briefly and let it warm up a little bit, or you'll get ice that forms on the lens. But other than that, you don't really have to worry about anything. On the days that it's more like blustery and snowy and blowy a little bit, we can shoot from the windows of the machines, and we'll always angle the Polar Rovers to be a wind block, basically, as we look at the bears, and then we shoot out the other side of the rover.
Okay. And any tips on how to deal with the white-on-white situation, white bears on white ice and snow?
Yeah, that's certainly a consideration. It's not as big of a deal as you think. It's not something that we're constantly dealing with out there. Again, it's more of the days when maybe it's really gray and overcast, later in the season when there's a lot of snow down and you're taking closer up pictures of the bears. Then you need to overexpose a little bit, anywhere from a stop to maybe even 2 stops, depending on how much light you have out there. But as soon as you're backed up a little bit and there's some willows, the trees, the little small shrub trees and stuff like that involved, or if there's some blue sky, really anything else that's going on, rocks in the picture, your camera will account for that pretty well. Okay. And again, your guides are there to always, help. Like, hey, you guys, this is, if you're taking this type of shot here right now, you consider overexposing it. I find that in general, we're maybe shooting a third of a stop or so brighter, overexposed all of the time, just because it tends to be a little bit gray out, and you're trying to brighten things up a little bit. But yeah, it's not necessarily because everything's really bright and on white. And with that said, too, people ask about polarizers, for like, oh yeah, all the light reflecting off the snow and all that kind of stuff. And yes, again, we might have those 5-6 days during the course of the season when a polarizer ends up becoming indispensable for those bright days. But again, it's actually pretty rare that we'll have to have a polarizer on when you're out on the tundra.
Okay, thank you. Well, is there a media room available where travelers can store their photos, or should they plan to bring their own laptop?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. You should at least plan to bring your own storage device. There are computers at most of the hotels, and some of the guides and other guests have their own computers where you can just use the computer to transfer from your camera directly into your own hard drive and just use the computer as a medium for that. And that'll save you from having to travel with the computer. Certainly the most convenient thing is to have your own computer that you can just go right into. And in that case, what most of the guides do, again, is, if you have your own editing software, your pictures on there, you can pull up ones that you want to work with the guide on and talk maybe a little bit about post-processing, or look at your pictures for composition and that sort of thing. So there are some benefits to having your own computer to maybe enhance your own experience, or enhance, just the ease of access to everything, but it's not 100% required.
Good, thanks. Does the packing list that NatHab will be sending include what sort of photo equipment would be good to bring, lenses and so forth?
It does. we've written some stuff up in there to, that talks about some of this stuff like white balance and tripods and camera, lens sizes. Really it comes down to everyone has sort of their own system, their own favorite lenses to use, the ones they're most comfortable with. And, it's kind of like having, a big heavy jacket when you go up there. Like, it's better to have it and not need it, but I know it's hard sometimes to travel with all of our photo gear. So if I was going to make a recommendation, a wide angle, something wide angle is really nice, like 18 to 24, somewhere in that range is nice. If it's a zoom, even better. Same thing, like a mid-range zoom could be, really fun. And then something that has a little bit more reach, up to 3 or possibly 400 millimeters is nice as well. Personally, what I carry up there, I have a Nikon system. I have a 24 to 70 lens that I take, and then I have a 300 that I have. And those are the two lenses that I use exclusively on the Rovers.
Okay, thanks, Colby. So I think I'll transition over into some general experience type questions. And this one, if you're not on a photo tour, will you still have a window seat and beanbag?
You will still have a window seat on every NatHab trip. Even though the Rovers can take 30 or 32 people, we'll at the most put 15 people on those. So that's standard with every NatHab trip. For the beanbags, if you request them, there's usually a few extra ones kicking around because we have a lot for the photo trips. You're not necessarily guaranteed, but if you ask your guide when you get up there in Churchill, it's usually easy enough to procure one. What might be a better solution, again, to guarantee yourself is on my own personal travels, I always take an empty beanbag, and then when I get to wherever I'm going, I just fill it up. And that's really easy to do. You can just buy some popcorn or some rice or, sand, whatever you want to do, and fill it up when you get there. And it's really easy to travel with that, just empty little bag.
Well, that's a great tip. Thanks. What month has the highest concentration of polar bears?
The age-old question. So the deal is that now we're running all of our polar bear trips in the middle of bear season when it's at its optimal time. There are some weeks on the shoulder seasons where NatHab isn't offering trips that it's possible to see bears and likely to see bears, but maybe not in great concentrations. And of course, the beginning of the season, that would be because it's still too warm and too far out from the ice forming that not a lot of bears have shown up yet. And at the end of the season, like after we offer our trips, there's a risk of maybe the ice is frozen and the bears have just left. So NatHab, we're putting our trips right in the middle of all that to try to take out the guesswork and guarantee that there's going to be a lot of bears out there. With that said, every week is different. I've had the best weeks be in early October, and I've had the best weeks be at the end of November. And some of that's going to come down to, what you're personally looking for. If you want sheer numbers of bears, you could hedge towards being there somewhere in November, and it's more likely that there'll be more bears on any given day, but it's certainly not guaranteed. But if you're there and you want good action and you want interactions and bears doing cool stuff, it can just as easily be October 12th as November 20th. It really doesn't matter.
Oh, good. Okay. Overnight accommodations. There's a question here about the overnight accommodations. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure, yeah. So all the trips start and end in Winnipeg, and we stay at the historic Hotel Fort Garry, which is one of the old Grand Trunk Railway hotels. It's a gorgeous hotel right in the middle of the city, really easy to access a lot of things that Winnipeg has to offer that you might want to see, cultural and natural history and everything. So it's a cool way to start the trip. And if you have an extra day or two on either end of your trip, it's a neat place to stay and explore the city from. From there, we fly up on our own private charters that are exclusive to NatHab. We fly to Churchill, and then we stay in what I was sort of calling the utilitarian type of accommodations. And there's several different hotels that we use up there. They're all about the same. Town is very, very small. Everything's within walking distance of all the hotels for just a couple of minutes away, everything. And yeah, it's very comfortable. It's very cozy. They're warm, but they're not the lap of luxury. It's a remote Arctic town as well. So I think the take-home message is you'll find them very warm, very comfortable, adequate for what we're doing, and then you'll be happy to have the extra night with the Fort Garry and the spa that it has.
Sounds nice. The nighttime trips that you mentioned, is it dependent on how many people that want to go? Do you have to have a minimum number of people to go out at night, or do you go with any number?
Yeah, great question. So remember too, when we're talking about nighttime, nighttime begins at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe even earlier, 4 o'clock in the afternoon as the season goes on. So nighttime is really what we would normally think of as evening time. All of the activities on the trip, of course, are optional. You're never forced to go on anything. One thing that happens is that after dinner we do cultural programs, photo slideshows, and this is also our opportunity after dinner to go and take some night photos. And so they're all optional. It doesn't matter how many people want to go. We have the disposal, and as guides, it's our job to make the most of everything for you. Like we want you to burn us at both ends. If somebody wants to go out and take pictures by the coast, then we're going to go do it. Typically we end up back in town at about 9 o'clock each evening.
Okay. So we have someone listening who is booked on the Tundra Lodge photo trip, and he's wondering how that might be different than staying in town in terms of photographic opportunities.
Yeah, so they are different experiences. Of course, you're on the Tundra Lodge, you're giving up some of those more intimate opportunities, like getting up close to hoarfrost, or meeting some of the local people. Like we had a picture of Peter, the Inuit gentleman, doing a drum dance inside of the Inukshuk. Those opportunities don't exist when you're on the Tundra Lodge, but you'll have a lot more opportunity to shoot when you're on the lodge. It's much easier to set up a tripod. People that do have the 500 and 600 millimeter lenses will find them very useful on the Tundra Lodge. It's kind of funny to think about on the lodge, but you're out there for 4 full days, and there's bears all over the place all the time, and people will get tired of you. You can't just sit there for 4 days and look at the bears. You'll end up going in, having some coffee, talking to your friends, editing some pictures, taking a shower, taking a nap. And so what ends up happening on the lodge is you get a lot of personal time with the bears when other people are around, they're doing other things, and you can go find a spot on the porch all by yourself and see these bears and have one-on-one personal time with the bears. And so that's cool on its own, and it also, makes for some cool, intimate photography time for the bears as well.
Okay, thanks. And would you be more likely to see the aurora if you're out at the lodge?
We have a bunch of different checks in place on all of the trips so that if the aurora comes out, we make sure everyone has an opportunity to see it. With that said, the photo trips and the ultimate Churchill trips have access to their own shuttles. So if the northern lights come out, the aurora comes out, we can drive outside of town where it's darker and you're away from the lights of town washing out to see the aurora. So it makes for better photographic opportunities. If you're on the classic town trips, then in the evenings, basically after the evening programs are over, the shuttle drivers, they're done for the day. They've already had 12-hour-long days of driving, and so they're sleeping. So if it comes out at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're on the town trips, you won't necessarily have the opportunity to get outside of town. So that's where the Tundra Lodge is really nice. If the northern lights come out at 1 o'clock in the morning, the guides will come down the hallway and wake everybody up, and you can just walk right outside on the porch in your pajamas and look at them, and you're 15 miles away from town in the darkened Arctic sky. So it can be really cool out on the Tundra Lodge for the aurora.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to back up and ask you one more photograph question. For the novice photographer Should I consider taking a small photography class, or will I be able to take decent photos on fully automatic?
You can definitely take decent photos on fully automatic. Personally, when I do my trips, and I think most of the NatHab guides are similar, is when we're doing our photography specific presentations and like sort of these little mini lectures, we focus a lot more on composition, right? So it's not like full manual mode and f-stops and how to use the menus on your camera. It's more just developing your eye to compose pictures to where they're interesting pictures, where you can capture the feeling of the place that you're in, both to sort of convey that to other people you might show the photo to, as well as being able to recall that experience more intimately for yourself, and then doing that in an artistic, visually pleasing way. So that's what most of the slideshows themselves focus on. And then the more technical components of what f-stop do I want to use, and how does this thing work in my menu, and overexposing for white balance or for white on white. All those things we do more on a one-on-one basis when we're actually out in the field, because everyone has such different equipment. We get to those same ends through different means depending on what people's equipment are.
Okay. There's a question here about non-photography trips. So we have someone who's planning on taking her almost adult children, 18 and 21, and wondered if there are other trips, Churchill-type trips, that are available that don't focus on photography.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, most of them. So we have our classic town trips, and there's 6- and 7-day versions of those. And yeah, then what happens is, instead of some of this photo-specific stuff for evening times, you'll get more cultural programs. So you get to visit with the Inuit folks. There's a Métis woman that speaks with us. There's a gentleman that talks about Arctic history and exploration. Sometimes groups go curling. So there's things like that that you'll do to get to know the town a little bit more. So on each one of our trips, you'll get kind of the same things, but you'll get maybe more of a certain thing depending on which trip you sign up for. So for instance, on the photo trips, you're getting a photo-specific guide and some evening programs that are catered specifically towards photography. If you're on the classic trips, there's still plenty of photo opportunities, but we're focusing a little bit more on the cultural stuff in and around town when we're not out on the tundra. There's also the ultimate Churchill trip, and if you guys really truly want to see a little bit of everything, the ultimate Churchill trip also includes dog sledding, it includes helicopter ride, and then again, on that trip, they also have their own dedicated shuttle to take advantage of, hey, maybe there's a bear walking through town, or a good chance to go check out a fox out at Cape Mary or something like that. And the ultimate Churchill trips get a little bit more flexibility that way with their own vehicle.
Okay. All right, I have some bear-specific questions for you.
Right.
Do some of the bears have a pink tint, or was that just a reflection that we were seeing in some of the photographs?
Yeah, it's funny. When you're out there and you're in the light, you can have this like kind of soft glow coming through the clouds. So it's kind of like a refraction type of thing. You'll find it when there's especially when there's a lot of new snow, and you have this refraction. And so yeah, I think it was maybe that one picture of the bear looking up into the corner of the screen, and you get with a real soft focus, you get that pink. And I have a lot of pictures of ptarmigan and Arctic hare, where they're a lot closer to the ground, to the snow, and you get that pink hue. It's really cool, but it's from refraction.
Okay. So in most species, the male is prettier. Is there any discernible difference between male and female polar bears?
There is, and that's one of the cool things about spending so much time out on the tundra on these trips with your naturalist guides, is you'll get to start practicing these things. Yeah, I mean, aside from just the huge size difference between the fully matured males and females, the males will often have big scars on their face and on their shoulders from fighting. There's some differences in head shape as well. Certainly if they're standing up or rolling upside down, it becomes very easy to tell. walking around, you can often notice a pee stain between the back legs of the females. So there's a bunch of different ways depending on the behavior of the bear and the proximity of the bear to sort of suss it out.
Okay. So when viewing the polar bears from helicopters, there's a question here about whether that stresses them out.
Great question. Yeah, so all the helicopter tours are run in the wildlife management area as well as the national park. And Manitoba Conservation is the organization that manages all those areas. And so there's specific regulations in place. In Churchill, there's only one company that is permitted to operate inside these areas, these management areas, and they have a 200-foot ceiling that they can't drop below. And so that in itself usually takes care of the problem because you're high enough and far enough away from the bears that it wouldn't bother them. If they do start exhibiting behavior where they start moving around or, maybe they start running or they look a little agitated, there's protocols in place for when and what to look for in order to pull away. And so if the bears start, and it's the same thing for, if there's moose or, whatever else it might be that we find out there, there's these behavioral protocols as well as the ceiling. So if they start doing these things that we know are like looking towards, maybe it has some anxiety or something like that, then we just peel off and we leave it alone. And then you don't come back to that animal, right?
Okay. And, okay, where are the bears pre-season? Are they hibernating? Are they just somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one thing that will be a big focus on your first days when you get to Churchill is some of the physiological things that are going on. These bears don't hibernate. In fact, no bears hibernate. So it's kind of a big topic to get into as a little question here. But the general sense of it is they're in a denning period where they're not eating, and they're inland, anywhere between just a couple of miles up to maybe 30 miles inland. And then they're waiting all summer long throughout the heat of the summer. And some of the bears will, go inside like a little den. They'll dig down maybe into the permafrost where it's cooler. They'll lie on the, the windy side of some of these ponds and maybe drop into the ponds during the day and, let convection cool them off. And so they're just sort of biding their time between late June, early July, all the way through when they are able to get back out onto the ice, which is at the end of bear season in November.
Okay, good. So I'm going to combine a couple questions here. This is about the aurora again. If it comes out at night, do you have a way, if people want to be woken up, do you have a way that you can take care of that and notify them?
Yes, we do. We actually have several different things in place within each hotel, as well as with the guides themselves being able to get access to the hotel and to you guys in the hotel to wake you up. And again, different trips have different things going on. We talked about the Tundra Lodge trip where you can literally just walk outside in your pajamas onto the viewing platforms and see it. The Ultimate Churchill and the photo trips, we have up until 10 o'clock at night, we have shuttles at our disposal. And then if you're on the Churchill trips, then you can just walk outside and check things out. Now, remember that there's bears all over the place. There's bears in town all the time. So it's not just as simple as I'm going to wake up and I'm going to walk outside. We do it in a group, in a controlled setting, and with your guide. But yeah, we make sure that if the lights are out, you guys get to go out and see it.
That's great. We're down to our last few questions here. So speaking of the hotels, there's a question here about whether there is Wi-Fi available at the hotels that are in town.
Most of the hotels now have Wi-Fi that's available, and some of them even have an extra computer in the lobby that you can go use if you'd like to. I believe there's still one or two hotels that don't have their own Wi-Fi, but you can walk across the street into some of the lobbies and lounge areas of the neighboring hotels or restaurants and use it there. So it's really easy to get online if you need to.
Okay, thanks. And I think think this is our last question. I'll do one more scan through after this one, but I think this will be it. When guests are out at the Tundra Lodge, are there any excursions from there, shuttles and so forth, that you can actually leave the lodge?
Yes, each day there's a machine that you know, you have your own dedicated Polar Rover at the lodge. So you're staying out on the lodge, and then you still drive out and rove around the management area to different places during the day, and then you come back. And so there's morning excursions and there's afternoon excursions. You know, sometimes you can do both, sometimes you do one, and it depends a little bit on the group and the guides, and you know what's the best plan for everybody to maximize everyone's time there. One little bit of anxiety that I hear a lot about the lodge is, oh, geez, I don't think I could stay on the lodge the whole time. And like, I mean, I'm a hiker, a rock climber. I'm out cycling every day, and I'm going. And I worked for several years on the lodge, and it's really not that confining. The lodge is big, it's spacious, it's roomy, it's long. You can get outside on those platforms. We go on those excursions during the day. You know, depending on your lodge trip, you'll be on that thing, you know, 3 or 4 days out of your trip, and there's always stuff going on. It's exciting out on the lodge, and it's a fun place to be, and there's plenty of places to move around, and you can do yoga in the morning and stretching and walk around, and it's a cool place to be.
Sounds fantastic. Okay, there's one last question here that's important I want to get in, and then we'll make this our last one. What about food? If someone in this case is a vegetarian, strict vegetarian, is there any concern about that? And I think let's just talk about special diets in general.
Sure, yeah. We can handle any type of special diet, and we do all the time. Vegetarian stuff it's easy. Like we crank it out on every single trip. There's always vegetarians. It's super common, and all of our standardized menus already take into account a vegetarian diet. If you guys have other things, you know, they're gluten-free or whatever, I can name them a gajillion different things, just let us know. We can handle all of it. The hotels are really good about doing meals, and of course they have their own, you know, full kitchens and all that stuff to work with. And then for the lunches during the day when we're out, you know, on our wildlife excursions, NatHab has its own chef, and we have our own kitchen that we rent in Churchill for the bear season. And so same thing, if you just let your coordinator know before you come up to Churchill about your dietary request, they'll send all that up there to Churchill and make sure they have whatever they need to cater to your diet.
Good, okay. Well, you've gotten a lot of compliments today on your presentation, and we have a few people here who've actually taken the trip and are just raving about how fabulous it is. And so, boy, makes me want to just jump on the next plane and get there myself. But I think we'll have to stop this virtual journey now. So I am going to turn it back over to you, Colby, for anything you might want to share before we go.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. Everyone, again, thank you very much for attending today. If you have any other specific questions for me, continue to fire them out onto your chat there, and the gang at the NatHab office will get them over to me, and I can be in touch. But otherwise, thanks for joining me today, and I hope to see you up in Churchill.
Thank you all for giving us a little bit of your time today. Thank you, Colby, so much, and of course, Megan and Kendall, who did a great job of fielding all of the questions for us today. We appreciate you as well. And with that, we'll say good day and conclude our webinar. Goodbye, everybody.